Alrighty, everybody, it is currently Friday, November 7th, 2025, and I'm coming at you live from the island of Hokkaido in northern Japan. Because today we're talking about the Ainu people, or Ainu, which Ainu does. They're people from Japan. I feel like that's an important thing to know off rip if you didn't know that already, but just saying Ainu, if you say Ainu, that kind of sounds like a Japanese dude asking for anal sex. um, I don't know. That's probably not how you say it. I think it's Ainu. Um, but Ainu does kind of sound like an Asian dude being like, "Do you want to have anal sex with me?" it does. It does sound a little bit like that to me, which is why I'm going to be saying Ainu uh, throughout this whole thing. Because if I say Ainu over and over and over again, I'm just gonna be laughing the entire time. Um, yeah, that's gonna be the topic for today's episode. I can't remember the last time we did like a culture feature like this, like a cultural overview. God, I feel like it's been a while since we've done like a full on, like we've done religion and all that stuff, and I guess that's culture. Um, but it's been a minute since we did like a full on, like the first episode. That wasn't even a full cultural overview. We did do a full cultural overview of the Aboriginals. Not a full, but like a a bigger look at the Aboriginals and what's going on, or Aboriginal Australians, I should say, because I guess Aboriginal, it's just kind of like the word indigenous, but I think it might have a little bit of that context of being a little bit more demeaning than indigenous, but I think it means the same thing. So when you yeah, so when you like say like Aboriginal, for me, I think of the boys down under. That's who I'm thinking of. The guys sipping on that grog and doing chants and stuff like that. That's who I think of when I say Aboriginal. But I guess Aboriginal just means like indigenous or native or something like that. Which hey, the more you know. But so these people, the Ainu, they are Aboriginals of Australia, or not Australia, of Japan. I don't know. To me, like the context of that word, it doesn't. Once again, that I guess the definition of the word is indigenous or whatever. I'll look it up real quick. But to me, saying it in that context doesn't make any sense because I just associate Aboriginal with the boys down under. And I guess most people do too, but it's an adjective meaning indigenous or original inhabitant, which I yeah, I mean maybe not original inhabitant, right? Like that's kind of the thing you always hear about this shit is like these are the original inhabitants of this land, and it's like they're not the original, right? That's not no one is. People that maybe looked like them were, but not this specific, tribe or you know mob or like village of people or town of people. They're not the original inhabitants, right? They were the second to last who lived there, right? It's like the Sioux. The Sioux in the Dakotas. People will be like, "Oh, they're the original inhabitants of the Dakotas." But when I did that Northeastern Indians episode, I found out that those boys were originally around like North Kakalaki or like Virginia or something like that. And then when the white man came, they went to the Great Plains, right? I found that out about them. And so they're not the original inhabitants. There were people there, I think maybe the Chippewa. I don't know if that's right. But there was people there before the Sioux showed up. So they're not the original. They're the second to last. And it's obviously like, you know, propaganda, like movie propaganda. I guess even intellectual academic propaganda that kind of makes people associate uh like these tribes with being the original, stewards and inhabitants of the land. When it's like no, maybe there's like a few groups out there who were, right? But like specific like tribe to tribe, most of those tribes uh some of them moved in relatively peacefully, some of them not so peacefully. But either way, they're not the original inhabitants, right? You could say like Native Americans are the original inhabitants, or I guess indigenous. I'd say American Indians. All right, that's just what American Indians are the original inhabitants of North America, and it's like, yeah, that's I guess kind of true to an extent. Um, but it's also kind of like meaningless because it's like, well, that's not like a country or a tribe or like a really now we kind of think of Native Americans as being like this like cohesive cultural kind of group, right? Cultural, I guess even ethnic group. But like no, that wasn't the case always, right? It wasn't always the case. Now, does that mean that the British that they were right to just show up and be like, "Yeah, we're just gonna like kind of kill you guys, and then take all your shit"? No, that doesn't. That's not what that means. You know, people will conflate those two things and being like, "Well, the Sioux fought the Chippewa to live in what is now South Dakota, so why does it even matter that the British locked a bunch of people in a barn and lit them all on fire? Right? What does that even? That's nothing." Yeah, like I don't know. I don't. I don't think either group maybe necessarily was justified in doing what they did, but um, the British certainly were. I think if either group has a claim, has a better moral claim, it's going to be the American Indians. But I think it's a close race, dude. Honestly, like you look at some of the things, especially that the Plains tribes were doing. It's it's kind of close. In all honesty, uh, the they're not. They don't exactly have the moral high ground against the whites. The Indians don't have the moral high ground against the whites in every instance. There are some where there is some tribes where that like stereotype of like they just live in huts and they just like meditate all day and like look at a deer and talk to it. Like there is some tribe and they never fight anyone. There is some tribes that were like that, but they were few and far between, right? Obviously because they lived with other people, right? And other people they're gonna be greedy and they're gonna try to take your shit from you. So, and I don't know. I just wanted to say that just because like Aboriginal calling people the original inhabitants of the land is kind of crazy. You could say that they are the long-term inhabitants of the land, but original just isn't true at all. It just simply isn't. Um, and that's once again not to say that you could just roll up on somebody and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill all of you and take all your shit." Right? Can't do that. But at the not even but and at the same time, those people are not the original. They were just there before the British showed up. I don't know. I don't. People are gonna take that as political or a white supremacist, or maybe they're gonna take it as red supremacist. Um, but it's to me, it's just the truth. It's just the truth of the situation. There maybe is a few people somewhere out there that are still living on the land. They can chase their genetic or tribal cultural lineage all the way back to the fucking first people who showed up there. But for the most part, a lot of people stole from other people, and a lot of people got stolen from. I think is the ultimate conclusion that you have to come to. And obviously, there's one group who did the most stealing. The British, they did. It's that once again, not be hating on the British, not me, hating on white people or whatever the fuck people think. Um, just saying they stole the most. And where they is that that does that is something. Being the best at stealing when everybody's stealing all the time, being the best at it is it's kind of an accomplishment. It is kind of it definitely is impressive. And I wouldn't say it's like nah, I guess it is kind of a good thing, especially back then. Uh because back then shit was just brutal. It was like you had to steal from other people, or else or else your country was gonna get invaded or whatever. Now, does that mean you try to steal the entire world away from other people? I don't think so, but you do gotta do a little bit of stealing, and the British were the best at stealing. You know, you can sit there and be mad about it or happy about it. Um, but they were the best at stealing. Not anymore. Now it kind of seems like the British are the best at getting stolen from, dude. That they are not in a good fucking situation right now. But speaking of island people, you know, speaking of people who live in kind of cold, islandy conditions, we got to talk about the Ainu today. So, Ainu, Ainu, they they're a water people. You know what I mean? Like if this was Avatar, they would definitely be part of like the Northern Water Tribe or something like that. Um, and they do, I think, a pretty sick culture. We're not like I think for the Eskimo one, I went a little bit more in depth. This one we're not going too in depth. There's actually a lot of history to talk about with these guys because they are on like the main one of the main four islands of Japan and southeastern Russia. So they're a little bit more involved in shit than the Eskimos were. Like the Eskimos, they were just chilling where literally no one else was chilling. So they like never really fought anyone. They never really fought each other. And they were just chilling up there, munching on food, not really inventing a whole bunch, not really bothering anyone either. Just kind of sitting up there being happy. Um, but these guys, the Ainu, whatever they're called, they were a little bit more involved in uh global affairs, I'll say. Just because they're so close to Russia and China and Japan and all that stuff. I mean, you look at the history of those three countries; they were getting pretty active. They were getting pretty active, and so the Ainu they're involved a little bit in that. So the Ainu are the indigenous ethnic group of northern Japan and southeastern Russia. Like I said, they mostly, not mostly. I think they live entirely on islands. A few little islands up there. There was, I think, at some point a couple on the mainland, but these are island people. You know what I mean? They're doing the what's that? The hula. They're juggling fire. No, they're not. It's actually a lot shittier than that. You go to a luau and you eat some roast pig. You go to a fucking an Ainu luau, you're just eating a fucking steamed fish. They're very British like that. They're not. I guess they are a bit festive, but they live in the north. They live in the cold. They don't have like the Polynesians. They had time to invent all like that great, fun, you know, outwardly beautiful culture. Because I do think that the Ainu have a beautiful culture as well. I think most cultures are pretty interesting at the very least. Um, but the Ainu, they didn't have time for all that bullshit, dude. They didn't have time to be wearing coconut bras and making grass skirts and, having all that shit. They didn't have time to do that, dude. They didn't have time to, like, make these magnificent fucking whatever. They didn't have time for that, okay? They were up in the cold, eating fucking walrus blubber. I don't know about walrus blubber, but they were just up in the cold, eating the parts of the animal that no one wants to fucking eat, okay? Sorry, Polynesians. I know you're like the island people, ocean people as well, but the British and Ainu, yeah, they developed a culture. The British developed a culture. The Ainu developed a culture, but they didn't have. There was nothing for them to be happy about. Okay, I'll just say that much. Like the Polynesians, they got these beautiful beaches. They're eating good all the time. They're all fucking like jacked as shit. A lot of hot women in there. A lot of really ugly ones too, unfortunately. But but the Ainu, they ain't got too much to be happy about. They're already in a not great situation, and they're gonna be in an even worse situation. Like most quote unquote indigenous. I don't even know what that makes. I don't even understand fully what that word means anymore. Because it's like, are the British indigenous? I guess they're Anglo-Saxon, but they're also Picts and Celts and stuff like that. So are they I don't know. I don't understand it at all. But when you think of the word indigenous, you think of a certain type of people, right? Let's be honest. You don't think of some dude whipping out the fucking laptop and filling out an Excel spreadsheet. That's not who you think of when you think of indigenous. Who you think of is some dude living in a hut with his wife. Maybe he has like some sort of weird clothes on or like a tattoo or something. And that's who you think of. Let's be honest here. That's just who you think of when you think of indigenous. You look at like kind of the history of those people, none of them really had a great time. And that, spoiler alert, the Ainu are no different. They're not an exception to the rule of quote unquote indigenous people having a bad time. All right, so the Ainu, like many other or Ainu, like many other ethnic slash tribal names, means the people, and they're referred to as the Imishi by historical Japanese texts. So Ainu just means people, and that's the case of many other. uh, I think basically I think Navajo. I think that just means people. Um, Sioux, that probably means people. Most of like the Native American tribe names just mean people. And so I kind of assume that most other tribe, I think that's just something that you do where you're just like, no, we're the people. We are the people. Maybe I could be wrong, but that's probably something that every tribe does. Maybe English, maybe that means the people. I don't know. Or it means the people of England, obviously. Duh, I'm retarded. Um, and so I guess if you name, I guess the tribal people, they name themselves before the land, right? Because uh, you look at like England, right? I'm English. You're from the land of England, obviously. Same with Scottish, same with Welsh, same with Irish, same with like French. It means I'm from the land of France. Doesn't mean people or anything. It's in reference to the land as opposed to in reference to the people, if that makes sense. So I just wonder why tribal people do that. It's like, why do they give themselves? Why do they like name themselves necessarily before they name the land? Or you can kind of look at it from the perspective of a lot of tribal groups, including the Ainu. They they don't really view themselves necessarily. They do view themselves as owning the land, but not really in the same way that that like European or like some other, like a lot of other societies do. Mainly European is what I think of, but or Western, I guess might be the term. But I feel like the Chinese, they have a pretty, or at least in their history, obviously not anymore, but they had a pretty strong sense of like ownership over the land. Uh, and so maybe that's why a lot of these tribal people, especially the ones who have animistic belief systems, they believe there's a spirit in everything. Maybe those people name themselves before they name the land because they don't necessarily view themselves as having like complete dominion over the land. I don't know. It might be something like that. I could be wrong. Uh, so the Ainu, though, they do live in northern Japan and southeastern Russia, but they once inhabited not most of Japan, but like a pretty big chunk of Japan. So Japan has got, I think it's four main islands, but the main island is Honshu. That's the name of the island. Kind of sounds like you're snoring a little bit, but Honshu's the main island. I think that's where Tokyo is. I know it's where Tokyo is, but I think Osaka might also be on there. Um, and I think a lot of their major cities are like when America, before we dropped the nukes on Japan, we were thinking about invading Japan, and we were like, dude, we gotta invade Honshu. We can't invade these other islands. We gotta go straight for the heart. So Honshu's like the main. I think it's the most populated island on Japan by far, or in Japan. It's like where all the major cities are and stuff like that. It's the main part of Japan, right? Like if Japan didn't like lose any of its original territory after World War II, like the Germans did, but if they did, Honshu would have been like the main one that they kept. That would have been the one that they would like fought and died for. That's like the main island of Japan. And the Ainu, they used to go to about like the middle of Honshu, right? Or that's where they were densely populated. There were others south of that point, but mostly Honshu, this island just north, one of the other main islands called Hokkaido, I think, and then another island that's like just off the coast of eastern Russia. That's where these guys were chilling back in the day. So, like I said, once inhabited most of Japan, but they were pushed north by the arrival of the Yamato people in the 9th century. So Ainu are one of at least the original, maybe not necessarily like original, but indigenous. They were one of the indigenous groups of Japan before the colonial, I guess maybe colonial. I don't know, because they weren't the. I don't. I think the Yamato people were just like, we're gonna show up here, and this is gonna be our new home, right? It wasn't colonial in the sense of like how Britain had colonies, and they were like, and we're just gonna like extract resources from here. Um, I think it was. I think the Yamato people like also kind of migrated there in a certain way. I'm sure they had their main base somewhere else. I can actually. I'll look it up real quick to see where they came from. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I guess invaded is the best way to put it. So yeah, and they showed up in the 9th century, so in the 800s. I'm assuming they originally came from China, maybe Korea or something like that. But they pulled up. I think they're also called like the Waji or something like that. But they pulled up, and they're the reason that the Ainu had to go up north. All right, so after that point, they lived mostly in Russia and Hokkaido, Japan's northernmost major island, where they developed much of their culture. So obviously, the Yamato pull up and they're like, "Fuck you guys, this is our place now." Uh, and the Ainu are forced to go north. And obviously, when you enter like a new environment of any kind, your culture is going to change a little bit. But when you enter a new environment like that, like Aikido or Hokkaido, I guess it's for some reason to me Hokkaido sounds better, but it's Hokkaido. Hokkaido is very cold. Obviously, it's in northern Japan. It's just off the coast of Russia. It's yeah, it's a very extreme environment. I'll say that, and so it makes sense that their culture changed a whole lot when they got pushed up there, and also just like the act of being pushed up there, that's going to change your culture a whole lot. You're either going to like go crazy, like full on white boy Nazi crazy, and be like, we're going to kill all of you and take over the world, or you kind of like adopt a little bit more of an isolationist policy of being like, we're going to do our own thing because we don't want to like fuck with you guys because you just pushed us off our original land in the first place. So they're up in Hokkaido and one other island. There's another main island that they were on near Russia. I'm sure I'll have it written down later on there, but I can't remember. So, but in Hokkaido and Russia, uh, the Ainu mostly hunted and fished, but they did participate in trade between Honshu and Northeast Asia. So you're imagining like a map of kind of Japan in your head. There's like this whole like kind of big section of China that reaches all the way up near where the Ainu were at. And so the Chinese would kind of like, instead of going straight across the sea to Japan or to Honshu for some reason, they did a lot of trading with the Ainu. So that's what they mean when they say Northeast Asian trading. And there was also other groups up there, but they weren't doing they were doing some shit. They were definitely fucking around up there, but they're not China. China number one. China is not asshole. China number one. They were doing a whole bunch of trading with the Ainu. Basically, it was just the Chinese would go through the Ainu, and then the Ainu would give the shit to Japan. I guess China just didn't want to fuck with Japan one on one, or Japan just didn't really have a lot of goods that China wanted. That could also be the case. The Ainu, they're living up north. They have access to things that the people in southern Japan don't have access to at all. So that's also a distinct possibility. Is just the simple fact that the Japanese didn't have anything that the Chinese wanted, so they were like, but the Ainu do. The Ainu, they've got, you know, fucking walrus toenails or whatever Chinese people eat. So the Chinese did a lot of trading with the Ainu. All right, and now we get a little bit into their involvement in foreign affairs. So in 1234, the Mongol Empire arrived in eastern Siberia, causing the nearby Nivik, something like that, and Udeje tribes to begin raids on the Ainu. So the Mongols, they're obviously going hog wild, stealing as much as they can. That's probably number two. Number one is probably the UK in terms of stealing. Number two is probably the Mongols. The Mongols stole a whole bunch. A lot of people too. They stole a lot of people. To be fair, so did the British. The British stole a whole bunch of people too. But the Mongols showed up and they were like, fuck you guys, we're taking this shit. And so that kind of pushed these other tribes, the Navich, I don't fucking know, and the Udeje, to be like, well, fuck it, we got to get our shit. The Mongols are taking all our shit. We got to get all our shit now. There's these other guys, and you got to remember, this is like northern Japan, Siberia type of territory. So I imagine the ocean freezes over a whole bunch in the winter, and so these two tribes in specific started doing raids on the Ainu to like get all their shit because they were like, fucking Mongols just took all our shit. We need all our shit from the Ainu. All right, and so, but after the Mongols forced submission from these groups, the Ainu began invading their lands before the Mongols retaliated and drove them out. All right, so Navik and Udeje, they're pulling up on the Ainu, being like, "Give us all your shit. We want all your shit." But then eventually the Mongols get to the point where they crush the Navik and the Udeje, right? But then the Navik and the Udeje, they kind of viewed their submission to the Mongols as the Mongols joining in their alliance against the Ainu. So when the Ainu started going into past their land, right, into the Udeje and Navik land, which is now Mongolian land, the Mongolians now viewed the Ainu as their enemy because this is now their land, right? The Mongols didn't force the Udeja and the Navik into submission because they were like, stop being mean to the Ainu. They were like just trying to force them into submission into the first place. And so when the Ainu were fucking with what they thought were the Navik and the Udeja, the Mongols were like, nope, this is fucking our land now. Get the fuck out of here. So, and I think they might have a little bit more interaction with the Mongols. Let's see. So, yeah. So the Mongolian Yuan and the Chinese Ming dynasties had amicable relationships with the Ainu, trading with them and sometimes giving them positions of power. So a major thing, like I said, that the Ainu had that the Chinese wanted that they couldn't get from Japan or really anywhere else nearby was furs. Uh, I don't know necessarily like sea otter fur. I know that's a big one. I don't think there's any beavers in that part of the world, but like aquatic marine mammal type furs, I'm sure seal. I'm sure there was a lot of seals in Hokkaido and up there in northern Russia and stuff like that. And that's what the Chinese wanted from them. And so they imposed this system of tribute, but it wasn't like that bad, I guess. Like it could have been worse. I'll say that. The Chinese and I guess Mongolians, because if you don't know, the Mongolians controlled China for a while, and I guess that's what the Yuan dynasty is. Um, but they could have done a whole lot worse to these people. So they basically were like, "You give us furs, and then we'll give you other shit, right?" And one of the big things that they gave them was silk. And the Chinese silk, I guess, was of a very very high quality. And so that was the main thing that allowed the Ainu to be the go between the Yamato down in southern Japan and the Chinese, because the Japanese silk was, I guess, of an slightly inferior quality for like certain applications, or maybe it was just one type of silk is better for the other, or for a different type of situation than another type of silk. I don't know how fucking silk works, but that's like the main thing that the Ainu did with the Japanese, or with the Japanese and the Chinese. And the Chinese, they did do a little bit of like they did fuck with them a little bit, but not too terribly much, or at least the Yuan and the Ming dynasties didn't. In 1644, the Qing dynasty imposed a fur tribute system on the Ainu of eastern Siberia and would often take the chieftains' daughters as wives, which, not great, but it's not that bad. Once again, you got to remember, we're dealing with Imperial Japan here. In Japan, they got that dog in them. You short guys, kind of funny looking sometimes, talk funny too. Sniffing panties into anime and shit like that. But there's something about them. All right, well, this fucking Riverside or whatever it's called, the software, or not software, the recording website, it's fucking retarded. I don't know. It literally, something fucked up. won't upload the file. Hopefully this one works. If not, then I don't know. You're all fucked. I don't know what else to say. No, this episode just isn't gonna come out. I'll try to I'll try to figure something out, but nothing is working correctly. I looked up how to do it on ChatGPT, how to like recover the locally recorded file. I have to like search my file system on my computer, and the file system is completely fucked up. Like I'm trying to look something up. It's been buffering for about like 25 fucking minutes here. Uh and it has like one result and it's still buffering. So I don't know if it's gonna come out or not. At least this fucking part will come out. So where were we at? All right, so like I said, the Ainu were the main traders of silk between the Japanese and the Chinese, causing the Japanese to want to control them. And once again, I don't know if you're familiar with, you know, sort of the history of what Japan does when they want something, but it's really not great. It's not great for the people who have the thing that the Japanese want. It's not great for the Japanese. It's not really great for anyone. It's a pretty tough, shitty situation when the Japanese want something and they cannot have it. So, yeah. Spoiler alert, the Ainu about to get fucked Japanese style. And that's never great. It's never great when the Japanese decide they want something from you and then they, more importantly, decide to get it. All right. Holy fucking I hate my computer so goddamn much, dude. Turns out watching porn nonstop on your computer, it kind of fucks it up a little bit. Who would have thunk? So, all right. In the early 19th century, the Tokugawa shogunate claimed control of Hokkaido and this is the Russian island, Sakhalin, Sakhalin, I don't know, and began to separate families and began to rape women while selling the men as workers to merchant vessels. All right, once again, remember, Japanese want, Japanese gon' get. So the Japanese pull up to Hokkaido and Sakhala or whatever the fuck that island's called. I'm just so goddamn mad. I'm infuriated right now. The fact that this file won't even upload is it's pissing me off a lot, but there's nothing I can do about it except keep talking about the Japanese and how they rape many people. So many. It just seems like the Japanese just want to rape. I don't know. I think that's kind of the whole reason they get into war. Like some groups get into war to like impose their dominance. Some groups do it, you know, for money. Oh, my fucking file uploaded. Thank fucking dick, dude. Oh my god, I was about to rage so hard. All right, now I'm in a good mood again. Yeah, and I'm in a good mood and I'm talking about rape, dude. It's a good day. All right, I was just being a little bitch there. I don't know, it wasn't working. What do you want me to say? So, um, and obviously raping the women and selling the men as workers on merchant ships, which means slaves. They were selling the men into slavery while raping the women. Not great for either group. I wouldn't want to be a man or I wouldn't want to be a person, really, in the way of Japan getting what they want. So, and by the way, I'm just going to kind of run through the rest of this stuff because I got some shit to do. So it'll probably be only like a 45-minute episode, but doesn't really matter because no one's fucking listening to it anyway. All right. So, and this caused the Ainu population to drop from about 80,000 in the beginning of the 1800s to less than 20,000 by 1868. And also, I don't know, like I was reading the Wikipedia article and all that stuff, and the Russians just never really came into play, but there was a pretty decent amount of uh although like I said, the Ainu were also on a Russian or what is now a Russian island that Japan claimed. So I guess that makes sense why the Russians never came into it. No, never mind. I'm retarded. It was all the Japanese. You know, the Chinese they were fucking with them. You know, taking their kids or taking their daughters as wives and stuff like that. Yeah, that's shitty. That is like the ultimate cucking and stuff like that. But the Japanese, they took it a little bit farther than cucking, dude. They were rucking, you know, and I ain't talking about rucka ollie, and I ain't talking about rucking up a hill. They were rape cucking these motherfuckers. So in 1869, as a part of the Meiji Restoration, the Japanese established assimilation policies for the Ainu, which involved taking their land and ordering them to cease cultural traditions. And the Ainu, they weren't like the Aztecs or some of these other groups where like their cultural traditions were like skinning babies alive so it rained or whatever. They did like a little bit of animal sacrifice, which yeah, that's not even I don't know. I don't think animal sacrifice is that bad in the grand scheme of, quote unquote cultural traditions. Um and they took their land from them up there, which that's just shitty land to take. Like you can look up Hokkaido on a map. It's like beautiful land and I'm sure you can farm on it, but it is not it I mean, yeah, it's beautiful, but and to be fair, most of Japan maybe it's not as cold as Hokkaido, but it is very mountainous and stuff like that. So the Japanese are just kind of used to that mountainous, maybe colder type of shit. So maybe that's why they were like, just give us the fucking land. Um, and so yeah, they took their cultural traditions. So that was speaking the language, but speaking the language, doing their traditional religion, which we're going to talk a little bit about. But like I said, this wasn't a group of people who had really any like egregious uh, cultural traditions. Uh, they weren't really. I'm sure they were like marrying 16-year-olds and all that stuff, but back then that wasn't that bad. Oh, and also the Meiji Restoration. That's when Japan decided they were going to be samurais again. So someone was fucking with Japan. The Japanese didn't want to trade with anyone anymore, and so they like closed themselves off, and they only traded with the Dutch, and they were like, "We're samurais again," and that's basically what the Meiji Restoration was. So, as the Japanese transferred land ownership to Yamato farmers, the Ainu were often forced into labor on these farms. Um, Sometimes they were farms, sometimes they were like, they would work in like flour mills and stuff like that. Although I don't know how into flour the Japanese are, but like rice processing plants and shit like that. Uh, and the Ainu were forced into doing that. And yeah, like I said, the Japanese were forcing their assimilation. They didn't I don't think they necessarily wanted to kill all of them, but they didn't want any nonsense from them. They did want them to speak Japanese, to follow, Shintoism or, you know, Japanese Buddhism or something like that. But I don't think they were too interested in killing all of them. They did want to take their land. They did sell a decent portion of them into slavery. Um, but in terms of killing every single last one of them, maybe they wanted to and they just knew they couldn't. Sorry, I'm eating a Tootsie Roll right now. Maybe they wanted to kill all of them. But it does seem like they're a little bit more interested in yeah, just forcing assimilation and taking all their land, which some people call that a genocide, and to me, that's like, all right, let's calm it down a little bit here. They were genocided in a way of losing 60,000 people in like 60 years and not gaining any of those people back in terms of like population growth or whatever. That is a little bit genocidal, but forced assimilation, it's fucked up. I don't really know if it's genocide though. All right, and so after the annexation, the Ainu were given full citizenship, which made them subject to Japanese law, specifically the Hokkaido Former Aborigines Protection Act, which, sorry for smacking and all that stuff, which, yeah, whenever you hear a name like that, like the Democratic Republic of the Congo or the DPRK or whatever, that they're doing the opposite of that. They are doing the opposite of protecting the Aborigines of Hokkaido. This was basically the gameplay and the design for the forced assimilation of the Ainu into Japanese culture. All right, and so now we're going to talk a little bit about the Ainu culture and the Ainu mythology. Like I said, they were big and efficient. They were island people. Most of their cities and stuff like that uh, were on rivers if they weren't directly on the ocean. These were water people. So the Ainu had chiefs, but they did not have judicial power. This was given to like community panels. I imagine like elders or something like that, um, who often use beating as a punishment. Yeah, obviously these dudes they're fishing and hunting to survive. They don't have time to build like a fucking super max jail, and they don't have enough people to where capital punishment, you know, is a valid is a valid thing to do or something that makes sense. Goddamn, I just gotta stop and finish this Tootsie Roll. All right, dude. The noise that was coming out of my mouth was probably hellish to listen to, but most of this podcast is hellish to listen to, so who really gives a shit? All right, yeah. These people would beat the shit out of each other. All right, next fact. I knew women were often began receiving tattoos at a young age, and the tattoos started as a small dot on the chin before eventually growing into a full-grown Joker smile, dude. Look up I knew women mouth tattoos. These bitches look like the Jonkler, dude. That's what they look like. All right, you could say I'm making fun of their culture, but it's true. It looks like they're at fucking Comic-Con or some bullshit like that. All right, I don't make the fucking rules. It's just what they look like. And we're getting through the facts because I'm kind of sick and tired of this bullshit. I gotta go home tonight to see my mommy and daddy, so we're gonna fucking get through the rest of this shit. These bitches got a Jonkler smile on them. All right, maybe you're into that. I know there is a bit of a clown fetish thing going on. So if you're into clown fetish shit, look up Ainu woman face tattoo. All right, next fact. The Ainu have an animistic spirituality, but also believe in gods or deities which reside in certain features/animals, and these gods or deities are called Kamui. Kamui Hachi is the goddess of the hearth. Kim Un Kamui is the god of bears and mountains. Reaping, they might have got that one from Japan. Reapin? No, Repan Kamui is the god of the sea, fishing, and sea animals. And Keaton Kerr Kamui is the creator of all the things. That's the big guy. You know, and you'll find that in a lot of these, you know, I guess Aboriginal indigenous belief systems of it's like, yeah, there is spirits and shit all over the place, but there usually is one big guy at the end of it all. So the Ainu practiced arcult arctultry, or it's just that's just the word for bear worship, which I guess is like enough of a phenomenon to where it has its own name, placing special significance on Kim Un Kamui, who brings them bears who have gifts of hide and meat. And the traditional belief among Ainu is that the world is a spherical ocean with islands, and this whole spherical world ocean thing rests on the back of a fish, and when the fish moves, it causes earthquakes. And I don't think that that's fucking, that far off from the truth. All right? They were kind of right. The world is kind of one big ocean, and then there's just land masses on it and shit. In earthquakes, that's just a tectonic plate, right? And what's a tectonic plate? It's underneath the earth. The fish is underneath this spherical planet ocean island thing. So I think they were pretty fucking close about that shit. All right, that's all I've got for this episode, guys. I'm just kind of done with this shit, but I hope you have a good day, a good week, a good year, a good life, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.